Well, after all the hype and anticipation, HBO finally may have found their next big hit with their most different and riskiest show yet. Hey guys, Cameron, there's my review. The series premiere of Westworld. Yes, finally the show has premiered. This is Season 1, Episode 1, the original, and you guys know how much I was looking forward to this premiere. I said in my fall preview, this was my most anticipated show in general. Not just new show, but in general. I was so looking forward to this, and how could I not be? I mean, after all of the hype and everything we've heard about this show, I mean, between the controversy that's been getting and the amount of money HBO invested into this show and just the amount of effort they put into it. I mean, this really seemed like it was going to be their next big hit, and honestly, I think that's going to be the case. Westworld in general really, really impressed me. I love this first episode. I thought this was fantastic, and honestly, I really do think this is going to be HBO's next big hit, but I'm going to get into that in a little bit. Anyways, let's just get in this first episode because there is a shit ton of stuff to talk about in this first episode. This episode was 69 minutes long, and I have a lot to say about it, so let's just get into it because we already know a lot going on. I'm glad the episode was 69 minutes because it really told us pretty much everything we need to know about most of its characters, and I really did love that. There's obviously some stuff we don't know, but let's just get into it. So we start off, and we hear a man talking to the main character of the show, Dolores Abernathy, and he asks her if she's okay. She says she's not feeling quite like herself, and he tells her to lose the accent, asks if she knows where she is, and she says she's in a dream. He says that she is, and we see in reality she's sitting in this, like, dark room, and she's sleeping with her eyes open, it seems like, and she's got, like, a cut in her face. We don't know why, but the man asks if she wants to be awakened from the dream. She says yes, she's terrified. He tells her there's nothing to be afraid of as long as she answers his questions correctly. He asks her if she's ever questioned the nature of her reality. We then see her asleep in a dream place called Westworld, and this is really when we get into what's going on. The man asks to tell them what she thinks of her world. She says that some people choose to see the ugliness in this world, the disarray. She chooses to see the beauty in all. And right away we can tell that Dolores is a character full of positivity. I mean, definitely we see that. And she wakes up, she goes outside, she says good morning to her father, Peter, asks if he slept well, and he says well enough. He asks if she's well enough to sit down some of this natural splendor. She says she thought she might. She says she sees the good to believe that there is an order to their days, a purpose. The man asks what she thinks of the guests, and she asks if he means the newcomers. We see a few men then on a train, and one of the passengers talking about the past times they've been to Westworld, and before we see one man, Teddy Flood, listening in and smiling at what he hears, and Dolores says she likes to remember what Peter taught her, that at one point or another, they were all new to this world, the newcomers. They're just looking for the same thing, a place to be free, to stake out their dreams, a place with unlimited possibilities, and basically, she appreciates them for that. And Teddy then gets off the train and gestures to a few of the townspeople. He walks around town, and we then see a crowd of men talking about a murderer named Hector Escaton, who is a wanted murderer. He gunned down a marshal, and he's holed up somewhere in the mountains. Teddy is asked if he's the kind of man that put his medal to it, and he says not today. He obviously does not want to be involved with that, and he then goes into a saloon and asks the bartender for a rye whiskey, and a prostitute in the bar comes up to him named Clementine Pennyfeather, who I'm not going to lie is extremely attractive. I mean, I don't blame Teddy for falling for her because she's very hot, and he says he's new. She caresses his cheek and says he's not much of a rind. He says he'd rather earn a woman's affection than pay for it, and we see that Teddy is very pure. Definitely we see that. And another prostitute, Maeve Malay, says that he's always paying for the difference is their costs are fixed and posted right there on the door, which is kind of an interesting way to look at it because, yeah, in many ways you are kind of paying for it. So he then sees Dolores and goes to follow her. The man asks Dolores if she ever feels inconsistencies in her world or repetitions, and she says all lives have routine, and hers is no different, but she still never ceases to wonder the thought that any day the course of her life could change with one chance encounter. So Teddy goes to her, picks up a can, and says to not mind him. He's just trying to look chivalrous, and she says that he came back. He says he told her he would. He asks if he could see her home. So we clearly see these two do in fact know each other, and we don't know how, but she says that all depends on if he can keep up. He said he'd have to fetch his horse. She says that he better do that. The fact that she rides away on the horse, and he follows her. They stop near the plains, and they see Dolores' herd of cattle. He says it's beautiful. He says he never understands how she could keep them all headed in the same direction. She says she forgets that he dresses like a cowboy, but that's about the extent of it. And she points to one of them, says it's the Judas steer, rest will follow, whether, wherever they make him go. He asks how she picks him out. She says that she just knows these things, just as she knew that he'd be back, and he asks if she's saying that he's predictable. She says that there's a path for everyone, and his path leads him back to her. And she knows things will work out the way that they're meant to, and she says she still knows that her father won't be happy to see him. So they ride back to her home, and Dolores says that her father wouldn't let them run this close to dark. She hears a gunshot. He tells her to stay put, and a group of bandits have found her entire family. We see that they ask if the head bandit is on his father's chest, and asks if he has anything better than milk, and her father says to go ahead. Says he's in no rush to meet his judgment, but he's more the outcome. Hector then shoots him and just kills him right off the bat. I'm like, okay, they killed Peter in the first episode. That was pretty risky, and says that there's nothing but milk now. He goes to the other bandits, who says that it's a shame he killed the old woman before they could, and he says that she's still warm enough that he won't judge her for it. And Teddy then guns them down. The man that asked Dolores one last question says, what if he told her that she was wrong, that there are no chance encounters, that she and everyone she knew were built to gratify the desires of people, and they pay to visit their world. So right away we can tell there's definitely more going on than we think, and I thought overall this was very interesting. So Dolores then runs to her father. The man says that they're the people she calls the newcomers, and we meet this man who's known simply as the Man in Black. We don't know who he is, but he says that her father gave it up pretty quickly. He thinks he's losing touch. She points a gun on him and says he'll be following right behind her. He slaps her. He asks if that's any way to treat an old friend. He said he's been coming here for 30 years, and she still doesn't seem to remember him after all they've been through. He says that he's given her a little more pluck, and Teddy says to take his hands off her, and the Man in Black asks if he has any special tricks for them, asks if they taught him to sit up and beg, says he'll give him the first shot. After all, every dog has his day, and Teddy says he mouths one fast enough. Teddy goes for his gun, shoots him, but the Man in Black remains unharmed, and for some reason, he doesn't seem to be hurt when he hurts him. So the man asks Dolores what she would say if he told her she can't hurt the newcomers, and that they could do anything they want to them. So we get some really intriguing dialogue here. Again, we don't really know what's going on, and they did a really good job with getting us intrigued here, because the Man in Black says he never understood why they paired some of them off. It seems cruel. He takes a shot, says then he realized winning doesn't mean anything unless someone else loses, which means he's there to be the loser, and the Man in Black says to let him help him. Teddy then puts his gun near the Man in Black's head, but then stops himself, and the Man in Black says it seems he's not the man he thought he were. He then drags Dolores across the ground. Teddy continues to shoot, and the Man in Black remains unharmed. She begs him not to hurt him. He slaps her. He says he didn't pay all this money because he wants it easy. He wants her to fight. Teddy says not to touch her and shoots him, but to no avail. And the Man in Black then takes out a gun, shoots Teddy right in the chest, and Teddy's down. And I was shocked because Teddy's the main character. But the Man in Black says it feels good to be back, says it's time to celebrate. He drags her through the sand as Teddy falls to the ground. The man asks Dolores if what he tells her would affect how she feels about the newcomers. She said it wouldn't. They love the newcomers, and every single one reminds how lucky she is to be alive and how beautiful the world can be. She's then taken by the Men in Black. He closes the barn and presumably rapes her, which is just really graphic stuff. Right off the bat, we were off to a great start. And then we see the next day, things seem very much the same for some reason. We don't know why, but Teddy's back on the train, and he hears two women talking about life, talking about how life-alike they look and how he looks perfect, and he doesn't seem to have any recollection of the previous day, which is very interesting. So we then pan out of Westworld and see that it's actually a hologram filled in this very large room with tons of executives who are constructing the interior of it. And they did a really good job of revealing this, because you could tell that obviously there was something more going on the second that, things seem the same. But I like that they did, in fact, reveal in this episode. A lot of shows wouldn't reveal as much as they did in this first episode, but this show does. And I thought it was interesting that they did that. It honestly really did benefit them from doing that. So we see a bunch of people in lab coats discover that all the people are actually androids, and the horses as well are fake, and everything pretty much there is fake. So we meet two of the executives working there. One is Bernard Lowe and his assistant Elsie Hughes. They're talking about something, a new android that makes an unusual gesture that's not standard, and Bernard says that he went looking into the update. There's a whole new class of gestures, and she says if they didn't do it, then who did? And he says it must have been Dr. Robert Ford, who is in fact the director of, the entire, of Westworld. He's the one that came up with it, and says he must have shipped it in there without telling anyone. He says he calls them reveries. The old gestures were just generic movements, and these are tied to specific memories. And there is a lot of exposition to get through in this scene, but again, this is stuff we kind of want to know, because we didn't really know what was going on, and now that we do, we want to hear as much as we can about it. So she asks since memories are purged at the end of every narrative loop, and we basically find out that their memories, something bad happens, it just, their memory is wiped, and she has how he says that they are still in there waiting to be overwritten, and Ford has found a way to access them like a subconscious, and she says a hooker with hidden depths and as every man's dream. He says it's the tiny things that seem real and make the guests fall in love with them. He's then called away and leaves while she goes to the android and kisses it, because again, it's an android. I thought that was interesting to see. But it also shows that they really can do anything they want with them. And Bernard then goes to meet with Ashley Stubbs and Teresa Cullen. Two characters, one that I think I'm going to really like, the other that I don't know if I'm going to like as much, but he asks if they have a problem, and Teresa says that they have unscheduled activity, says that one of his creatures is restless in cold storage, they should be cautious, and says suspend a response team full armor, and Stubbs says he'll take care of it himself, and Bernard says he thinks that they enjoy playing dress up as much as the guests do. He says the host can't hurt them by design, and Stubbs asks if he has kids at home. Bernard says he doesn't, and Stubbs says that if he did, he know that they all rebel eventually, and he walks away. That, yeah, that's true. I mean, anyone knows that, when a kid grows up, they eventually rebel, and it's same with, he thinks, the hosts, he thinks that they're going to rebel as well. Teresa says to forgive him for being uptight. Every time a team rolls an update, there's a possibility of a critical failure, and Bernard says they don't update the androids in public storage, and the park isn't at a critical failure, we find out, in 30 years, and she says it means they're overdue, and basically is kind of worried that it's going to happen, because it hasn't happened in such a long time, and he says he'll go along too if it's one of his, they'll need his help, and she says that they're only his until they stop working, then they're hers. And he goes into cold storage, sees water come out, and Stubbs says that the cooling system has been down for weeks, and it's going to smell fantastic, and he recommends he hangs back, and Bernard does as asked, and when they're going to fix the leak, Stubbs says that livestock has got other priorities, and besides, no one really has complained, so they're not going to do much about it. They go to cold storage, and just the little scene, seeing all the leaking, I mean, really to show that, in general, they don't really care about, how the androids feel, how the conditions are, things I thought that was interesting. But they see all the androids. Stubbs takes out a gun, and Bernard tells him to stop unless he plans to decommission the boss, and I thought that was a very good way to set things up there. So then we get introduced to Dr. Robert Ford, who already is probably the most mysterious character in the show. He's just such a blank slate. I mean, you know that something's going on with him, but you don't know what it is. And he's with this older android who says that they don't make the old coffin varnish like they used to. Ford says they don't make anything like they used to. And the android says he's seen a few showdowns in his day. Ford says more than he knows, and the android says to drink to the lady with the white shoes. Ford says they should drink to a dreamless supper, and Bernard comes in. Ford says that Old Bill was always a good listener and was the second host they ever built. Asked him if they were with them in those days, or was that before his time. And Bernard says that most of them were decommissioned before he was brought on. Ford says that they repeated themselves and broke down constantly, and a simple handshake would give them away. And Ford asks Bill if he'll put himself away again. Bernard says he saw the new gestures of the reveries. They're beautiful. Says the distance he's traveled from then till now is remarkable. And Ford says that's a way to put it. Bill then puts himself in a bag. He literally zips it shut, essentially killing himself, and that was a very hard scene to watch, but it really does show that they kind of sometimes leave some of these androids to fend for themselves, which is interesting to see, but you can definitely tell that there's stuff going on with Ford, and we then go back to Westworld, though. Dolores again asks Peter if he slept well, but they did a really good job of not making this annoying, because the fact that it's a narrative loop, the same thing every day, it could be like a Groundhog's Day or something like that, but they did do that. There's something different that happens every day. Obviously, it's not going to be the same thing every day, it's just very similar stuff, and they did a good job of making this as interesting as possible. So She asks if he slept well. He says the same thing, asks her the same question, says he hopes to see her before dark since the band who gunned down the marshal is still hiding in the hills. She says she's not a child anymore and she'll just be fine. He tells her about when he was a lawman. She says she knows all about when he was a lawman, and he says he knows how boys think given all matter of drink and mischief, and she asks whatever happened to the fearsome ne'er-do-well, and we don't know what she's talking about, but he says he vanished the day he became her father. He is what he is because of her, and he wouldn't have it any other way. Honestly, a very touching scene. She says that she knows and promises to be home before dark. The train then comes, the newcomers get off, and once again, Teddy is one of them. And I couldn't tell if Teddy's an android or if he's a newcomer. That's something that they haven't really told us. But again, I don't really need to know. It's only the first episode, so he hears the same story about Hector. He goes through the same cycle he did, and however, before he meets up with Dolores, this time a man named Clarence comes up to him, who knows him from the last time he was in Westworld, and asks him what the good word is. Teddy walks away, is about to go to Dolores, but before he can, the man in black takes his place and says it's not as sweet as her, says he has other plans tonight, tells her to have a pleasant evening. He then walks into a bar, plays poker with some men there, and two tourists are then with the sheriff to go find Hector. The man asks how much longer this is going to take since his wife doesn't want to be left in the dark. The sheriff says they know he's up in the hills somewhere. He'll put up a fight when they... And the sheriff then starts to malfunction, and I mean like he starts to stammer, like he starts to say when they, like he can't stop saying it. The man asks him if he's okay. The woman says something is wrong with him, and she wants to head back to town, obviously because, you know, this is kind of freaking them out. And the sheriff is brought back to headquarters, where Bernard, Teresa, and Lee Sizemore, new character that we meet, who I really like, let me say, he could become my favorite of all the staff. They're trying to figure out how this happened. Bernard said they haven't finished the diagnostic yet, and clearly it's exhibiting some aberrant behavior, and Teresa said it's pretty fucking aberrant. The hosts get sick, they get lost, but this is grotesque. I mean, he's got, like, blood on him. I mean, it's really bad stuff, and she asked if there's a problem, if this is a problem with the updates, and Bernard said it's possible, but not likely. Ellie asks if it's the unlikely version, how many hosts he has updated so far. And Bernard says maybe 10% of the population. Ellie says they pull all hosts out of the population until they can figure it out. And Lee says that is 200 hosts spread across a dozen active storylines. And Therese says the guests interrupt their precious storylines all the time when they want to shoot or fuck something, which she's not wrong about. I mean, if they are in control of the story, then they can't really stop that. But Bernard says it's when they want to sell, when they want to sell complete immersion or 100 complete narratives, a relentless fucking experience, and pulling one character, the overall story adjusts. But pulling 200 is a disaster, and they can't close down and issue gift certificates, obviously, so they really are at a disadvantage here. They don't know what to do. Bernard says it's beautiful, his brow when he's angry, but trying to control it. The fine muscles pull into a little arc, it's elegant, as she has to record it because he'd love to show it to his team, and she says that he may not. She says they have over 1,400 guests in the park, and she needs to know if they're in danger. And Bernard says his core code is intact, which means that he can't hurt a guest or even hurt a fly. So she tells him to run a diagnostic and says, in the meantime, if there is so much as an unscripted sneeze, she wants to know about it, because obviously she's very concerned. I mean, now that she knows this is happening, this really isn't a good thing. But we then see back in Westworld, Teddy is at a whorehouse with his friends. They're talking in the park. The tourists are creeped out by him, and says that if he leaves them out in the canyons and they get bored, they'll just use him for target practice. And again, Teddy is starting to see that there's something off about it. I think this scene kind of confirms that he is in fact an android. So Dolores is painting horses by a river and sees a black family. The woman says they didn't mean to bother her, and this is the perfect example of dramatic irony. I thought this was really well done here. Basically, the woman says they didn't mean to bother her. She says they're not a bother at all. She feels ashamed being all by herself. Says the horses came there every day. Asks the son if he wants a closer look. She shows him the horses, and she tells him to not be scared. Tells him to put his hand out real flat. She says they're beautiful. He says that she's one of them, and she's not real. And this is the first sense where she starts to wonder, what is he really talking about? At first, she says that she has to go now. The sun's almost down. Tells him to watch out for the bandits, and doesn't really think much of what he said because she's programmed that way. But I thought that was interesting to see, especially because now we are starting to see that the guests know that they're not real, and especially with Dolores not knowing she's real, the question is she really going to respond to it? I thought that was a very interesting scene, and again, us knowing she's not real really added to the emotional tension of that scene. So Peter then finds a photo in the dirt, and Dolores goes back home as she was asked, and asks if Peter, if he was waiting up for her. She says she told him she'd be home before dark. He says he found it in the field today, and it's a picture of a modern woman. Now, we don't know who this is, but I am assuming this is when they constructed Westworld, and this picture has been buried there, but basically, Dolores says it doesn't look like anything to her. You know, she doesn't really think much of it. And she says she's going to go in and help her mother start supper. Teresa's then outside smoking. And Lee goes to her, says he had the same thought and he needed a little sunshine before turning in. Asks when she gets to rotate home again. She says it's if he's this bad at writing small talk, how the fuck did he get his job? And she tells him to get to the point. And he says he wanted to apologize if he came across as aggressive. He says he wanted to talk to her about the update. And she says that this problem has been resolved. He says that there shouldn't have never been an update in the first place, and says that Ford and Bernard keep making the things more lifelike. But does anyone truly want that? And asks if she really wants to think that her husband is really fucking a beautiful girl, or that you just shot someone. Part of the fun of it is that they're not real, and this place works because the guests know the hosts aren't real. She asks what he's suggesting. He says that they should stop the updates altogether, maybe even roll them back a bit, you know, because he really feels they're not doing them any good. And he tells her that to think of the benefits, especially in terms of design, time, maintenance costs, and not to mention that the Dr. Ford factor, and says he's got to chase his deep end right under the deep end. He says no one respects him more than him, but at some point she corrects him for incorrect usage of pronouns, and she says that he was saying that their fearless leader have a breakdown, he wants to leverage it for his career. He feels that it'd be a benefit to them because they'll be at a loss without Dr. Ford, but at the same time they feel like it's a good thing because he kind of feels like Dr. Ford is going crazy. The fact that he has all these updates, the fact that he's so concerned about remaking all these androids and making them more lifelike, he feels that the best thing to do is, if he has a nervous breakdown, it might honestly help them. So he just wanted her to know that she has a support, that he knows that the corporation's real interest in the place goes way beyond gratifying some rich asshole who wants to play cowboy. She says he's right, this place is one thing to the guests, another thing to the shareholders, and something completely different to the management, and asks him what he thinks their real interests are, but unfortunately he doesn't have an answer to that. And this gets her kind of upset because she says that, you know, he's not really giving her the answer she wants, tells him to get some sleep, and he'll have more rich assholes to gratify tomorrow. But I do like Lee's, overall thought that maybe this isn't the right thing to do. I mean, clearly these androids are acting a lot more lifelike, and it's kind of scaring the guests away, we definitely see. So Maeve then takes the early night, says she's feeling a bit out of sorts. Clementine can cover for her, and we see I guess he was a pimp, Kizzy. He's told by the bartender to search through all of his money. He says the half is going to cut his throat. The man in black then goes to him, slits his throat, and drags him away. Such a hard scene to watch, but he drags him away. We don't really know what he's doing, but again, the Man in Black's just kind of a mysterious character, and I like that he's just called the Man in Black because we don't know what his real motive is. But Bernard then looks at a picture of what looks like his little girl, which is interesting because he said to Stubbs that he didn't have children back at home. This kind of hints that he does, and I thought that was a very subtle detail that maybe you might have missed if you looked away, but I thought that was very interesting to see because clearly Bernard doesn't really want to say much about his past, and especially that he told Stubbs he doesn't have children. I found that very interesting. So it appears they fixed the sheriff. Bernard says something he envies his forgetfulness, and I thought it was interesting what we're saying, because again, it seems like Bernard has some sort of past, and Elsie comes in, says that they have a serious problem with one of the hosts. One of the hosts, we find out, a psychotic break, and is shooting up a bunch of the hosts and pouring milk on them. Headquarters stop the scene, and it's kind of funny to see them stop it. Stubbs says that they have 2 guests inside, tells everyone else to sort this out. Elsie says they're supposed to turn each other, but only if a guest takes them on the High Sierra storyline. Walter always buys it. That's the host that went crazy. Bernard says he guesses that Walter got tired of it, and Teresa says this means the sheriff wasn't an isolated incident, that this is happening to more. So Bernard says it's good news, really, and confirms the problem was part of the update, and they can roll them back and clean them up and put them back in service. She asks if he thinks he's going to sign off on this homicidal thing going back into service. He says it's homicidal by design. Walter kills other hosts all the time. The method there is a little unconventional, but at least he didn't have a guest, and at least he didn't hurt a guest. And she says the hosts are supposed to stay within their loops and stick to their scripts with minor improvisation. This obviously was not minor improvisation. This really is scaring her because now they seem to be operating on their own terms. And she tells everyone they're going to recall all their updated hosts tomorrow. They are to examine them one by one and decommission the faulty ones. Bernard asks about the narrative since a recall of that size would be disruptive, and she's told that they're overstimulated friends to extend the saloon heist a week and make it twice as bloody. Should give them cover to recall the remaining hosts, and the guests will love it, obviously, because guests love watching chaos go down. And he says he's not sure if Ford will approve. She says she's not either, which is why he will be the one to tell him about it. And she says that this is his fuck up, it only seems fair. Ford says that they're creatures I've misbehaved, and basically that's what he does. He goes to Ford, who says that they're creatures that have been misbehaving, yet he hasn't isolated the bug. It's so unlike him, unless of course he has, and are simply embarrassed by the results. And Bernard says that it's the code, he added the reveries, it has mistakes, and Ford says if he's embarrassed to use the word, he ought to not be a product of a trillion of them. Evolution forwards the entirety of this planet, using only one or two mistakes, and Bernard says he flattered himself that they were taking a more dismissal approach, but self-delusion is a gift of natural selection as well, and Ford says it is, but they managed to slip evolution's lease, and they can cure any disease. He feels that this is going to work perfectly. He feels like this is just going to strengthen them and keep even the weakest of them alive. And one day, perhaps, they'll even resurrect the dead and call forth Lazarus from his grave. Which I thought was a very interesting scene to see. And just seeing that Ford thinks this is a good thing, really to show how delusional he really is and how he really doesn't realize the damage that it is causing. And I really did like seeing that. So he says it means that they're done, that this is as good as they're going to get. It also means that he must indulge him the occasional mistake, and basically that's going to happen. So back in Westworld, the Man in Black has only left 4 liters of blood in Kizzy. Says if he loses more than that he'll die. But for now, he's going to get some answers out of him. Kizzy tries to run away, but fails, and asks what he wants, and says that this is a complicated one. Kizzy says he doesn't play, he only deals. The Man in Black says he is livestock and scenery, he plays, and the others just come here to get their rocks off and shoot a couple of Indians. But there's a deeper level to this game. He's going to show him to get there and how to get there, and the Man in Black says there's a lot of wisdom in ancient culture, and perhaps it's time to dig deep into his. He then pulls out a large knife and scalps him, obviously off camera, but still, that was very hard to watch knowing what he's going to do. So Dolores then starts her day the same, but sees Peter looking at the photo, asks if he's been out on nights. He says that he has a question that they're not supposed to ask, and asks her if she knows the question. He starts to tremble, and Dolores thinks that he's sick. She says she'll take care of him. Obviously, we know he's not sick. We know he's kind of tripping up, and that obviously he's starting to realize what's going on. And he tells her that she should go and leave, and tells her that hell is empty. All the devils are there, and then she starts to tremble again. She tells him to stay right there and she'll find a doctor. She then rides into town to find one, but can't find anyone, but does find Teddy and says he needs to come with her right away. But before she does, a group of riders come up to them. Lee is then with Stubbs, and Teresa says with considerable effort and lack of sleep, he managed to massage events to inspire Hector to get into town a week early. He's also punched up the speech he gives her after he robs a saloon. It says it's truly chilling. Teresa says that she can barely contain herself, and Hector and his men then start this huge shootout, which was so well done. Very much gave me an old western vibe. I love this. May says that all the banks and trains around there, but they decide to rob them. Hector asks why not. They're all there for their particular vices, so he's come to indulge his. Dolores and Teddy try to get back, but Teddy is shot in the knee. Says he's just trying to look chivalrous, and Mace tells Hector he's a low-down son of a bitch. Hector says that he knows that they both believe the same thing, no matter how dirty the business, do it well. He then whistles to one of his horses. They try to get away with the safe, but one of the tourists shoots him in the neck, then kills his accomplice Armistice, so he's dead. The man then laughs in victory that they actually shot them through the neck and how real it looks. He asks his wife to get the photographer, and this was a great scene because this really does show how the guests look at these androids. They look at them as nothing but props. They look at them as, oh, it's all in good fun, when in reality, you can tell that for the android, it really isn't fun for them. And he'll take a picture of this, and Lee watches this in distress. Teresa says that maybe he'll get to his speech next time, because the fact that the guests end up changing, I thought was very interesting to see. The fact that he wasn't able to get to his speech, I felt bad for him there. But Dolores is then crying over Teddy. Teddy says that at least she got to see her one more time. She says he's not going anywhere. There's a path for everyone, and hers is bound with him. She kisses him. He dies in her arms, and she says that they've only just begun. Elsie goes to her. Dolores asks for her assistance, and Elsie tells her this will all soon feel like a distant dream, then shuts her down, and Elsie says they've got them all. So Bernard goes to Teresa, who asks if they have any preliminary results. Bernard says that most of them are checking out fine, but they had one who definitely was not, that being Dolores. And Ashley goes to her. We hear and Stubbs goes to her, and we hear the beginning of the episode play out. This is when Dolores is interrogated. This is how it all went down. And I like the way that we did come full circle with that. And she's asked about her father. She says that he was scared and wasn't thinking right. And Stubbs says he showed her a picture, asked if there was anything odd about it. She says that it didn't look like anything to her. And she's not wrong. I mean, really, we saw it looked like nothing. She didn't think much of it. And Teresa and Bernard then go to Ford, tells him that if Peter breached, he needs to be put down. And Ford asks if it wouldn't be best for them to discover why first. Bernard tells him that they've run a full diagnostic, but the results are confusing. Ford asked Peter what happened to his program, and Peter is completely lost at this point. I mean, he's quivering, he's stammering, and he says, when they are born, they cry, they come to this great stage of fools, and Ford says that is enough, asks him if he has access to his previous configuration, and Peter says he does. Ford tells him to access that, and Peter does his ask. Ford asks what his drives are. Peter says he tends to his herd, looks after his wife and daughter, who he must protect at all times, and whoever played Peter in this scene absolutely killed it. I love the way this was done. He is who he is because of her, and then starts stammering again. Says he has to warn Dolores. The thing they do, he has to protect her, and basically wanted to warn her because he starts to realize really what's happening to them, and he has to help her. She's got to get out. Ford says that is enough. Bernard says this goes way beyond a glitch. Ford tells him to access his current glitch, then asks for his itinerary, and Peter says that it is to meet his maker. Ford says that he's in luck, asks what he wants to say to his maker, and Peter says that he is most mechanical and dirty hand. He shall have his revenge on both of them, and the things he will do, what they are yet he knows, but they will be the terrors of the earth. And he goes to him, says he doesn't know where he is, he's in a prison of his own sins, and basically tells him that he's going to come after him. So it kind of gives us the hint that maybe these androids are going to rebel, but Teresa and Lee then rush in, tells him to turn it off, asks Bernard what that was. He says he doesn't know, he's off script, they didn't program any of it. Ford says that Shakespeare, and says they've used this host in a number of different roles. Bernard says he's been Abernathy for 10 years, he was a sheriff a while before that, and before that the professor from a horror narrative called The Dinner Party, and was a leader of a group of cultists out in the desert who turned cannibal. And Ford says that he liked to quote Shakespeare, and Bernard says that there are fragments of prior builds, and they feel that all of his prior builds are coming together, and that's what's happening, and that's why he's malfunctioning, and the reveries must be allowing him to somehow access them. And Ford says to not be alarmed, there's just old work coming back to haunt him. He walks away, and again, doesn't really think much of it. He thinks that that's all this is. Stubbs continues interrogating Dolores, and I thought, again, that was very interesting to see. So Stubbs then continues interrogating Dolores, says that her father whispered something to her, asked what it was, and she said that she shouldn't tell anyone. He said he wouldn't tell anyone. She says that he said these violent delights have violent ends. He asks if that means anything to her. She says that she doesn't think so. He asks if she ever lied to them. She says she hasn't. He asks if she's ever heard a living thing. She says that she never would. And Peter is then redesigned. Elsie says the wipe is complete, asks if any of that had an impact on her core code. And Stubbs says it wouldn't happen to Dolores, who's been repaired so many times she's practically brand new, but says to not let that fool her. And we find out that she's actually the original android. She's the oldest one there. Then asks what she thinks of her world, and she then says that she's the same monologue she said in the beginning. And I thought it was interesting to see. The next one, she goes to her father, who is in fact a new android. He asks if she's headed out to do some more painting of hers. Peter is taken into cold storage, very hard to watch. Bernard whispers something into his ear, and he's put with all the other androids, and the Men in Black then finds a tattoo on Kizzy's scalped head. We don't know what that's all about, but we then see Dolores, the final scene, she's outside, she hears a fly buzzing, and she kills it, implying that something in her program has changed. If you remember, they said they couldn't kill flies, and that is the way the episode ends. Great stuff overall, but let's just get into this episode, because I definitely have a lot to say between, the episode and really how I feel with the show overall. So overall, I already am hooked on this show. I absolutely loved this premiere. There's so many great things that are already revealed, and there's so many great things about it, but the first thing to talk about is its cast. The cast for this show is huge, and when I mean huge, I mean Game of Thrones huge. I mean, there are so many people in this cast, and virtually everyone across the board did a great job, but I need to talk about the standouts in this episode. By far, I think the standout of this entire show, in a show that has Anthony Hopkins and, Jeffrey Wright, the standout for me is Evan Rachel Wood as Dolores. I really do love this character because she really is the only pure android. She's someone that is kind of like a Disney princess in the way she carries herself. She's very innocent. She doesn't think much, of anything bad happening, and her memories is eventually wiped once something bad happens to her, which is very interesting to see. I really loved her character overall, and the fact that she's now realizing very quickly that what's happening to her is a lie. You can tell that she definitely has been malfunctioned, and definitely a lot of what she's learned from Peter, I'm sure she will in fact remember, but I thought that was very interesting overall. I really love meeting her character in this episode. Evan Rachel Wood, I've only seen her, I think, in a couple things before, but she absolutely killed in this episode. I really do love her character, and I can't wait to see where she's going to go in the coming weeks, because she already is so great in the show, and the fact that she is our main character, I'm very happy about, and I thought she overall was fantastic. I really love what she had to do here. Now, someone like Fanny Newton, the character of Maeve, she really didn't have a ton to do in this first episode. She was good at what we saw of her, but I think that she didn't have a ton to do. Most of the characters, though, did in fact have stuff to do. Jeffrey Wright's character, Bernard, I'm already very fascinated with this character. This is someone who, he is the creator, and he seems to be very confident in what he's doing, but he's also a little reluctant, and it also seems like he's hiding a lot, because, again, he told Stubbs straight out that he didn't have kids at home, but then we saw the picture of his daughter. So what's up with that? We don't really know, but I feel like Bernard is a very troubled past, and I'm sure we're going to learn more about that as the show goes on, but I'm already very fascinated by his character. I really love what Jeffrey Wright had to do here, and I really am looking forward to seeing where they go with him. James Marsden, I also thought was fantastic as the character of Teddy. Really do love this character. The fact that he does, in fact, know Dolores. I'm hoping we find out more about their past, because these two clearly do know each other already, and I'm looking forward to find out more about that, but the one character that I think, I also, like I said, I really did like Sidney Babbitt-Knudsen as Teresa. She clearly is very uptight, and she's very no-nonsense when it comes to unscripted chaos. She wants to do whatever she can for stopping that from happening, and she very much cares about what's going on. I really liked her character overall. And then Simon Quarterman as Lee, I really like the way that he thinks that this is, not supposed to be happening, that they need to stop the the updates and things I think overall their dynamic is going to be very interesting. I really do like their characters overall. The one character I'm worried that's going to get annoying is Luke Hemsworth as Ashley Stubbs. Not that I don't like his acting, because I think overall he was fine this episode. I'm worried that his character is going to become very much a know-it-all, very much an asshole, and all he's going to do is be like, oh, I know what I'm doing and you don't. That's what he seems like he is to me right now. Now, he may not end up that way, but through a lot of this episode, I kind of felt like that's what I was getting from him. I was getting kind of a douchebag vibe, and I really hope I don't get that, because I want to like his character, but right now, at least, he is kind of annoying. When he's questioning Bernard, or just seem like he knows everything, and they don't. I'm hoping he's not the kind of character. I'm just worried he is going to get annoying. Hemsworth did a great job in the role, don't get me wrong. I think he was really perfectly cast, but I just don't really know if I'm going to like this character that much, and I could really see him getting annoying. He's not annoying yet, but I could really see that happening as the show goes on. Now, Rodrigo Santoro as Hector Escaton, I really do like this character. He is the fugitive, but he obviously is bent on survival. I'm looking forward to getting more into his character, as well as Ingrid Bolsey-Bertel as Armistice, his accomplice. I can't wait to see more of their dynamic overall. Angela, Seraphine as Clementine Pennyfeather. We don't know much about her, except that she, is a prostitute, and that she is a very popular attraction, and that overall she's very attractive. Shannon Woodard, though, as Elsie. We don't know a ton about her either. The two characters I'm most interested in, though, are, first of all, is Ed Harris as the Man in Black. We don't know who he is. We know, obviously, that he is a guest, because, in fact, that they can hurt the newcomers, and he is, in fact, one of the newcomers. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of what's going on with him. I think that definitely he has some sort of plan. We don't really know what it is yet, but I think he definitely has something planned out for, in terms of the androids. I don't know if he knows what's going on, if he's trying to get them to figure out what's going on. I think he overall is very interesting. But Anthony Hopkins in this show, I was a little bit worried, because I thought, okay, you have someone like Anthony Hopkins, are they going to give him what he deserves? And they absolutely did. He was in this show a lot more than I thought, and I really love his character, Dr. Robert Ford. Because, again, they don't know a lot about him. He's very mysterious, he's very savvy, and we don't really know what's going on with him overall. I mean, he seems to be very sure of what's going on, but he's kind of starting to lose hope, and there's definitely more going on with him than we think. The fact that even the executives don't know much about him, I think that's overall very interesting, and I'm really looking forward to getting more into his character. I think he's really interesting overall, and I can't wait to see more of what's going on here. overall, the cast in general is so promising. I think everyone really was perfectly casted, and even though we have this huge cast, I think this is definitely probably the most promising cast I have seen all fall. I mean, not one of, this is the most promising cast. I think everyone really gave an amazing performance. Everyone really did leave an impression on me. Even someone like Thandie Newton, who didn't do a ton, I already know a ton about her character, and I really love seeing that with the episode overall. But what I really want to talk about on the show is the directing and the writing. I think the directing on the show is absolutely top-notch. I mean, there's so much different genres poured into the show. Though you really do get that Western feel at points, which is awesome. I think that's really something we haven't seen on TV in a while. So seeing that Western feel I thought was great. I really did love that. Kind of reminded me of Penny Dreadful Season 3, you know, half of that was a Western, so I thought it was cool to see here, and the fact that most of the show is going to be like that, I really do like, but then the science fiction element, you really do get that as well, and I really do like that, but it's also kind of a character drama, and I really like seeing that it was a character drama. I thought that getting to these characters are very interesting, and the story in general, there's so much interesting stuff going on with these androids. The fact that the second that something bad happens, their memory is completely wiped. I thought that was very interesting. The fact that this update is getting them to be more lifelike and human. Just getting into the androids, we already know so much about them, and there's so much possibility for this show, and I really hope the show does explore and that this first episode wasn't just a fluke. I don't think it's gonna be, but it kind of makes me worried that because we already know so much, I'm worried that the show isn't gonna explore it as much as it should. But I really do think it will. I think the script overall is very interesting. I think where we're going with the show, I can't wait to see. And especially the fact that we can tell that the androids clearly are starting to act on their own and not by their own scripts. I think is very interesting. I can't wait to see where that's going to go. But also, they did a really good job with the executives. You know, the executives in general could be very annoying and very unlikable, but they are actually very likable. They have stuff to them. You understand why they poured their work into this, why they're doing what they're doing, and that they really do care about the guests overall. I think it was interesting to see. I really did like their characters just as much as I liked the androids. I mean, the androids obviously are the ones we care for, but I care very much about, you know, Bernard and Teresa, people like that as well. So I thought that they did a very good job with that. And also the, you know, like I said, the script in general I think is really great. The cinematography on the show is the best I have seen in HBO since Game of Thrones. I mean, it is stunning. It is absolutely stunning. And you can tell they poured so much of their heart and soul in this. And they've literally poured so much money in this. If I'm not wrong, this is the most expensive show HBO has ever done. I mean, and it definitely does show. I mean, the sets are just so impractical. I mean, it looks like that is an actual theme park. You really do feel like these androids are in fact androids, and they did such a meticulous job with casting everyone and getting the sets and making it look so real to the point when we realize it's a theme park, we're generally shocked. Nothing about Westworld, when you look at it before you find out it's a theme park, looks like a theme park, and they did an incredible job with that. I absolutely love that, and I think just in general, it looks amazing. I mean, you definitely get that Western vibe. And then when you're in the, you know, production of it all, I thought that was very well done, and I can't wait to see the way that's going to go. This is essentially 2 shows in one, and I think they did a really great job with that. I really am loving where the show is going. I did kind of get an Unreal vibe, but the difference with Unreal and Westworld is that these aren't humans. They are, in fact, androids, and already that's something that definitely sticks out. And it's science fiction as well. It's way different than Unreal. You know, this isn't a TV show. This is a theme park, and I definitely really did like the way that was done. The score in the show is fantastic. I absolutely love the score. You guys saw the intro. I love the intro of the show. One of the best intros HBO's had, and the editing I thought was fantastic as well. This episode was 69 minutes long, flew by for me. I was into it the entire time. I thought everything introduced in this episode was so interesting. Honestly, guys, I think HBO really has a new hit on their hands. I think if they keep up the momentum here, this is going to be the next Game of Thrones. And yes, there's been things like The Leftovers and The Night Of, but they don't have the viewership that Game of Thrones is. As good as The Leftovers was, as much as I love The Leftovers, as much as it is my favorite show on TV, they don't have the viewership and the loyalty of viewers that, you know, Game of Thrones does. Game of Thrones just has such a large fan base, and it is the biggest show HBO's ever done, and obviously Game of Thrones is ending in 2 years, so this could be their next Game of Thrones. I could definitely see it happening. This show already is so compelling, there's so much poured into it, and I can't wait to see the way this is going to go. guys, this definitely did not disappoint. I am very happy to disappoint. I was worried that it was going to be disappointing because of how much I was looking forward to it, but it did not disappoint me whatsoever. I think it's going to be the best new show of the fall, without a doubt. I absolutely love this show. I could really see this becoming my new favorite show. But overall, guys, most guys saw this first episode. Love to your thoughts on it. I absolutely love this first episode. But that's my review. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for Luke Cage, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.